Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
All right. Well, listen, this is Brooke Halpin, and this has come together once again. And very happy to have, of course, my co-host, Mr. Tom Gauka. We've been together for a long time, many, many years. And we have a very, very special guest with us today. And I've known about Kit for a long time, and I think she's known about me too. I think she has. Yeah. So this is the first time, though, that Kit O'Toole is actually getting together with us on Come Together. So Kit O'Toole, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I have indeed heard of you over the years, and I'm really glad to be with both of you today.
Yeah, finally, at last, we get to
Yeah.
meet. Yeah. Now you're from the windy city of Chicago, right?
Yes, in the western suburbs,
Or the
but
western suburbs.
yeah,
Okay.
western suburbs of Chicago. But I, went to school and DePaul University for my master's. Also, I'm
Oh,
I'm in the
okay.
yeah, so I'm in the city, quite a bit. But yeah, born and raised.
No kidding. I spent a lot of time in Chi-town,
Mhm.
actually, and one of my favorite hotels in the whole United States is the Palmer House.
Yes.
You know,
Oh, classic.
right? I mean, that lobby is a knockout, isn't it?
Beautiful. I've actually had tea there before. They do some teas like during the holidays, and it's beautiful.
A
So,
lovely,
yep.
a lovely lobby for tea.
Yes,
Absolutely.
indeed.
Yeah, yeah. So we know that Kid O'Toole has written a book, and it's a book called Songs Songs We Were Singing. Now, what's interesting, as we all know, is that Paul wrote a song, and it's on Flaming Pie.
Yep.
And Paul did the song singular we were singing.
Mhm.
So you dropped the and you added an S to songs.
That's right.
The song. Very clever, kid. Very nice. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. And that song, the song we were singing by Paul. I mean, the first time I heard it, which was like, oh my God, John and Paul. Totally John and Paul. I mean, what else could it be talking about?
Yep.
Because it was just so beautiful. And anyhow, we know how amazing Mr. McCartney is anyway.
Mm.
So your book came out in 2015, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure you've done quite a few things since 2015. I know you're very busy and very active in the Beatle world, doing many podcasts.
Mhm.
I know I think you've been on a couple of the same shows that I've been on a number of times because, we're all in the same circle, actually,
Exactly.
Warren
Exactly.
Brown and Steve Marinucci and et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera. Um, and you also spend time at the Beatle Fests. Is that true, Kit?
Yes, indeed. I've presented there many times. I mean, I've been going to the Chicago Fest since I was in college, and you can
Oh
do the
my
math.
goodness.
You can do the math,
Wow.
Yeah,
but
real
it's been a
easy.
while. But yeah, I've been going there, and then I have I started out presenting just at the Chicago Fest, and I got to premiere songs we were singing there, which was a
Oh,
real
wow.
that was like a full circle kind of
Yeah.
moment for me. It was
Oh,
really
nice.
nice. Yep,
Yeah.
and so then I started, particularly when the book came out, I started appearing at the New York one too.
Oh, that's a
Um,
big one. Yeah.
Yep, which is really nice, and there's some overlap with attendees there, but not a lot. So I got to meet a whole new group of people, and that was fun. I've also presented at there are Beatles conferences, academic conferences. In fact, there's one coming up in November that Ken Womack, your friend of mine, is hosting, that's celebrating the 60th anniversary of Rubber Soul.
Oh
And
boy. Yeah.
yep, so
Wow.
yep, so I'll be presenting there. I've presented at previous conferences on, Abbey Road, Sergeant Pepper, all that. So yeah, I love doing presentations, and I love doing Zoom. I love, podcasting too, but there's just something about a live audience,
Yeah,
to
oh, absolutely. No
yeah.
doubt about it. And I
Mhm.
think Paul McCartney agrees with you. That's why he keeps performing all the time.
That's right. Yeah, he's never going to stop, and
Yeah.
I can see
God
why.
bless him. God bless him. Now, I also understand that you play guitar.
I play a little bit. I played a little bit of guitar, not a lot, but I took lessons when I was, gosh, probably seventh grade, something, or no, sixth grade. It was sixth grade, and I took some lessons then, and I can do a little bit, but it's mainly, I'm self-taught.
Okay.
Yep, I'm self-taught. In terms of that, but also in terms of just music in general. Some people think I have a degree in music. I don't.
Okay.
That's not where my doctorate is, but
Right.
but I've studied it, for many, many years. And so as I said, self-taught.
So you never formed a band then, huh?
No, I came close.
Did
I
you
think
really?
as we all did in high school, I think I almost formed a band with my cousins. And I think we were going to
Oh,
call ourselves the Penguins, and then of course we found out there was a band called a group called the Penguins. So like,
oh,
oh,
that's
okay.
funny.
Yeah, I don't know why we thought about that first, but then we're like, oh, we got to think of something else. And I don't know if we ever got that far, but came close.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the Penguins because my good buddy Ivor Davis
Yes.
recently wrote a book, Ladies and Gentlemen, Here Are the Penguins.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's right.
which is really kind of funny, you
Oh,
know.
it's hilarious. It really
Yeah,
is
yeah,
really cute.
yeah, because it's kind of like uh, Ed Sullivan saying, instead of ladies and gentlemen, here are the Beatles. It's that kind of takeoff.
It's
Yeah,
really cute.
Ivor's a very clever guy, of course. Yeah.
Oh, love Ivor. Just the best
Yeah, we
guy.
are. Everybody loves Ivor. Yeah.
Exactly. Who doesn't?
Yeah. So, what's interesting too is that when you look at the catalog of music that the Beatles put out, and I was just listening to actually I did 7 years of my radio show, which you may be aware of.
Yes.
So I
Mhm.
have 7 years of programming, and just for the hell of it, I went through my library and I saw something. I said, "Oh, gee, this sounds kind of interesting," and I started playing it, and I started listening to the songs, and I'm going, "Good God!" Just, it doesn't matter what song it is. Then there's the different periods, which is very remarkable to me
Mhm.
because you've got the early Beatles, you've got I call them the mid Beatles,
Mhm.
and then you have the later Beatles. Now, the mid Beatles, some people call the psychedelic Beatles as well,
Yeah.
because the early Beatles for me, I'm talking about U.S. releases, not the UK stuff. But for me, the early Beatles is 64 up to about, say, Revolver, but Revolver, before Revolver, so up to
Mhm.
Yesterday and Today. And then you get into the mid, and I would go from Revolver to Magical Mystery Time.
Yep.
And then the later years would be from the White Album to Let It Be.
Yep.
So, given that, what is if you have one, do you have a preference or a favorite period of the Beatles?
Oh boy, that's really tough. I guess I would say now maybe if you ask me next week, I'd give you a different answer. Because
Okay,
that's
fair enough.
that's the
Yeah,
way it
fair
is.
enough. Fair enough.
Um, Probably the middle period
The mid.
because, yep,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you, Revolver
Oh,
particularly is
yeah.
just, I think I don't think I'm saying anything controversial here. It's a masterpiece, and particularly, I nobody believes me when I say this, but Tomorrow Never Knows is
Yeah.
one of my all-time favorite Beatles
Mine
songs.
too.
Yeah,
Mine too.
yeah, because right, there's nothing that sounds like it even today. I mean,
No.
it's so unique, so
Yep.
ahead of its time. And
Absolutely.
and Rubber Soul, of course, is a wonderful album too. I mean, it really shows them, in transition, but getting even more sophisticated in their songwriting, bringing in Indian influences. So it's really another, landmark album. So, I mean, talk about a 1-2 punch in their career. Now, I love their early stuff too. I love their second album. I call that the R&B album, and I'm a huge R&B fan. So, and the drumming Ringo does on that, I
Oh yeah.
mean, it's just hard hitting, and it just an incredible album. And then of course the late period obviously is amazing too. But probably I'd say for now it's the middle period for
It's
me
the
because
mid
it's
period.
yep.
So that means you liked all the work that they were doing in the studio that they couldn't do live on the concert stage, and
Hmm.
you liked the electronic bits that they added to their music, and things like Strawberry Fields Forever and I Am the Walrus. You liked
Absolutely.
that whole period. I mean, even like the tracks on Magical Mystery Tour. I mean, even like the ending of the opening number, it's like, what the hell is going on with that?
Hmm.
And yeah, so they were doing stuff that was just mind blowing at the time because when it was coming out, now I'm sure you look a lot younger than I
Yeah.
am. God
Yep.
bless
I'm
you.
53.
Yeah, you are. So, but for me, when the stuff was coming out, as soon as it was released, I was hearing it for the first time, kid.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
it was such an incredible experience because it was like, what are these guys doing? Listening to even Revolver, even before you got to Tomorrow Never Knows, you're listening to a double string quartet on Eleanor Rigby. It's like, what is this? There's no
Yeah.
bass, there's no drums. It was very, very radical and so progressive at the time. It really was.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
and
and in fact, I when you bring up Strawberry Fields Forever, I just had to jump in. I talked with a good friend of mine who's a first generation fan, and I said, when Strawberry Fields Forever was released as a single,
yep,
what was your reaction? I
yep,
mean, that was so different. And there's that infamous, I think, yeah, it's American Bandstand when they played the video on there, and then Dick Clark is interviewing people in the audience, and they're saying, "Oh, that's weird. I don't like their
yeah.
hair." I mean, really funny
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
But, and she said that was a moment where with Strawberry Fields that you were kind of, she said you had to kind of make a decision. And in her case, she made the decision to follow them. She's like, I don't know if
mm,
I quite understand this,
mm,
but it's something different. And I'm
mm.
gonna I'm gonna go where this leads. She said other people were like, I'm going with the Monkees.
Yeah.
And I love
Wow.
the Monkees. So yeah, I love the Monkees. But
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
but
That
mm-hmm,
that that is radical because at the time, and again, I was there
mm-hmm,
when Strawberry Fields hit the airwaves. It was one of those things where I just kind of stopped.
mm-hmm,
Whatever I was doing, I stopped and I
yeah,
thought, what are they doing now?
yeah,
And they not only did they reinvent themselves, and you know this, one of the reasons why the Beatles kept going and kept going and kept going and were the top of the pops was their creativity and their songwriting. They didn't want to rest on their laurels and say,
mm-hmm,
okay, well, we'll just keep doing rock and roll. No, no. They were the type of writers that say, okay, we already did that. What can we do now that we haven't done before?
mm-hmm,
And that's genius. To me, that's musical genius. So not only did they reinvent themselves with sound in the recording studio, but then at the same time, when you look at the sleeve of the Strawberry Fields Penny Lane single, which I have,
uh-huh,
who are these guys? What are they the same guy with mustaches and George just got like a little goatee, he's wearing a long Indian coat. So not only did they reinvent their sound, but they reinvented their image.
mm-hmm. They most
And
certainly did.
and so for me, it was like there was no decision at all for me because I was already, I mean, I was hooked in February 9th, 1964. So for me,
Sure.
didn't matter what they did. I mean, it was like when we go, oh, gee whiz, you know what? That's kind of weird. I'm going to start loving the Monkees. I mean, forgive me. but I knew what the Monkees were about, and I knew one of the guys who actually I met later in years, who one of the producers who actually put it together, because
Sure.
it was created for television in Hollywood. I mean,
Yeah.
That's what the Monkees were all about. And of
Right.
course, there would be no Monkees without the Beatles. We know
Of
that.
course. Yes.
But I mean, to compare the Monkees with the Beatles is almost kind of like in early 64 comparing the Dave Clark Five with the
Mhm.
Beatles, which some people did. You know,
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah,
some
there was a
people,
real rivalry there.
oh yeah, oh Dave Clark Five, yeah, right, yeah. And again, Dave Clark was he's a very smart guy, and they were good.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But when you compare anyone to the Beatles, as far as I'm concerned, the Beatles were always first place.
Oh,
Yeah, there was
no
no
question.
doubt about it.
No
So
question. I think what she was getting at is that, and this is one of the reasons why I'm sure you love them, like I do, is
yeah,
that they do challenge you.
mm,
That the way the way they brought in classical music into the pop realm, the way, as we talked about, Tomorrow Never Knows. I mean, kind of pioneering sampling, and I mean the list goes on, and the lyrics becoming more surreal, and so, that's one of the things I love about them is that, they didn't, as you said, rest on their laurels, and were constantly changing. And I think, some fans like you and like my friend were like, hey, this is fascinating. I'm going to see where they go next. But I think there were some others that, they liked the poppy years
yeah,
of the Beatles, and
uh,
because it was great, and I'm not putting it down in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it was
mm,
wonderful,
mm,
but it wasn't Strawberry Fields, and that required a little bit more, a little bit more engagement, thinking. And I think some people are like, I like pop, so I think I'm gonna switch to what I'm comfortable with, and but that's one of the great things about the Beatles is that they were constantly changing and constantly challenging you, bringing in the avant-garde, things like that,
that's right.
which is what makes them so fascinating.
Yeah, and you hit upon the lyrics when you even today when you go over and you listen to the lyrics of Strawberry Fields Forever. I mean, John's lyrics were extremely, I would say, intellectual.
Hmm.
They were also very poetic,
Hmm.
and they were extremely thought provoking. So
Hmm.
it made you stop and think,
Hmm.
what is he talking about?
Yeah.
It's one thing to listen to I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is straight ahead. There's nothing wrong. I mean, that's what they were doing back then. Please, please
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
And all that stuff was great because you could understood what they were saying. But then for John to be writing these types of lyrics, it really made you stop and think. And I think that it was part of the education, I'll go that far,
Hmm.
of getting educated to different things through the Beatles, by the Beatles. The Beatles were actually opening up our minds
Yep.
and educating us in the world of music. That's what they were doing. And I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, you know, okay, let's go.
Yep.
All right. So Tom, let's bring Tom. Tom, come on in.
Hey, yeah, I agree. That they had an expiration date, which is 1970. So if by chance they would be still creating today, which would be awesome. We would hope that they would be able to keep up that creativity. But because there's that end date, you get this is it, and you can see it and its beauty. Um, I was listening to your podcast. Okay, we do a podcast. It was called
Mhm.
The Beatles Come to America, and it had a limited run. We were only doing USA, releases. So we knew that we had 20 shows and we were done. We finished before the pandemic, and
Mhm.
then we released it through the pandemic. And we knew we were done, but we continued to do this. But with your two podcasts, like are pretty exceptional. The
Thank you.
toppermost of the
Oh,
Poppermost
Yeah.
is so complex. There are so many different elements because I would do the editing. I think people when they do podcasts, when they had the podcast boom and everyone wanted to have one, they didn't realize that behind the scenes, You know, it's the writing, it's the editing, it's the, you know, production, it's the promotion. You know, you want to get it out there to people. You want people to listen to what you're saying.
Sure.
And wow, is this is a doozy. This is, you have so much going on in this podcast. How I have a lot of questions about it, but how do you divvy up all the responsibilities?
Well, it's well, first of all, thank you for saying that, because yeah, we work very hard on that show, and it's been a lot of fun to
Mm,
do. You know, tracing for those who haven't heard it, it traces the history of the Beatles on the charts in the UK and US. But we talk about them obviously, but we also talk about other artists that were on the charts at the time that
yeah.
either had a direct connection with the Beatles or influence them in some way. Sometimes we just throw ones in that just have such an unusual backstory that we have to talk about it. I mean, it's just been great. So yes, when you mentioned the editing, the credit goes to Martin Quibell and Ed Chen. They do the editing and do an incredible job of that. And so they do that section, and then I usually take charge of researching the Billboard charts.
Okay.
Sometimes we do Cashbox. Once in a while, we just just to change it up, where I go and thank God for the internet and look up at what were the songs of the day, and then have to kind of decide, okay, which ones are we going to cover that would be most related to the Beatles or would be of interest or influence them heavily. So and then Ed usually does the UK charts. He does the compiling of information there, and then it's just all of us going off and researching the different songs that we've chosen for that episode, and then Ed usually is the moderator, but we take over at times because sometimes he has a lot of songs he has to read off, so we do that, and it's really worked out well. I mean, as you said, splitting up the duties is definitely been the key to making this show work.
It's fascinating because we were talking about doing almost something that's very similar.
Hmm.
But then I said, "Oh, it's too much work." It's like
Hmm.
it's too much work.
Yep.
And I said, we want our voices to be heard. We love the Beatles and etc. But wow, when it comes down to it, it's just really complex. Do you have a lot in the can, and that they're like you've recorded them,
Yeah,
and
we
then
usually, we record like a month, at least a month in advance of each episode,
uh,
and we had tried in the beginning to get them all out like the exact month, like we were talking about, July 1965. All right, let's get it out in July. That hasn't worked out quite as well as we'd hoped because
sure.
the editing turns into, way more work. And again, Marvin and Ed get all the credit for that. So, but yes, we have them in the can at least a month in advance, and we usually record over like a couple of weeks. We'll do a Tuesday, like one Tuesday we'll do the UK charts, and then the next week we'll record the US charts. Things like
Uh,
that. Hmm.
you
Can I
kept,
jump into a second? Because you brought up a very, very interesting point, and it's about the other songs that were, let's say, in the top 20 on Billboard and Cashbox
Yeah.
during, I call it the Beatle years, okay?
yep.
Hmm.
And there, as you were talking, I'm going through my Rolodex here and my little gold memory banks. And the first song that popped up was a song called Lies. Do you know
Hmm.
that?
Yes,
By,
Knickerbockers. Yeah.
by the Knickerbockers.
Yeah.
First time I heard that, I thought, gosh, is that the Beatles? Lies,
Yeah.
man, lies, man.
Yeah.
Can't believe a word you say. I mean,
Hmm.
the melody and everything about it. And then the other one is the Beau Brummels.
Yes.
The Beau Brummels had Laugh Laugh, which was a pretty big single.
Hmm.
And they had also, it was kind of like a Rubber Soul takeoff in a way, and they had the harmonica going on in the background and stuff. So those were just two of the things that come to mind, but there are many, many more, of
Yep.
course.
And
Yeah.
what's interesting too about the show is you mentioned that the Beau Brummels Laugh Laugh. Who produced it? Sly Stone.
Yeah.
Now that's
Yeah.
very unusual. Who,
Yep.
who would ever have thought that Sly Stone
Uh,
introduced the Poppermost? What?
Yep. I mean, just yeah. So you make connections like that are just, it's endlessly fascinating to
yeah.
us.
It really is. It really is. Yeah.
The other podcast that you do is Talk More Talk. So that's
Mhm.
more that's established.
Yes.
You hopped on later, right? So you
Yep.
got Dan and Ken, and with all the product that's come out, solo and by the Beatles, you always have something to talk about. But you must have to be reaching in and going like, okay, what are we going to talk about now?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that we should talk about? So, how do you guys pitch those? Like, obviously, when the movie comes out, you got to see it.
Yes.
So you got that going on, but then you have those dry periods where you're like, okay, now what do we do? Are we going to do back to the egg? Or what
Yeah.
are we going to do? It's like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be a challenge. In fact, we're going to be recording our next episode on Friday, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but keep you in suspense. But yeah, we're recording an episode. Yeah, usually it's both after the show we've recorded and then during the week. We all bounce ideas off each other, and as you said, sometimes it's fairly easy if there's a big documentary coming out, if there's a book, if the album, things like that, then sure, that's a no-brainer. We'll do that. But as you said, there are dry periods, so we try to come up with ideas that also will engage the audience. Ken Michaels came up with this great idea that he used to do, I think, on another show, and he said, let's do it for this one, called Rack Our Brains. And it's a show where all of us bring in questions for each other. We don't know what the questions are going to be, and they're strictly opinion based. This is not trivia. And
okay,
so, there aren't any right or wrong answers. So it could be something like, what in your opinion is the best business decision the Beatles ever made, or the worst? We throw in things like that.
Nice. Nice.
And it often leads to some fascinating discussions, or it could be simple as which version of Maybe I'm Amazed do you like best, the live or the studio, and why? It's just things like that, and that became really popular with our viewers. Another one that we did, I came up with this one, which was Another Listen, where we take an album that when it was first released got
Mhm.
terrible reviews, didn't sell well.
Driving Rain.
Yeah, Driving Rain, there's a good example. Absolutely. Yeah, that was an interesting episode. And we listened to it again and determined, did it deserve that?
Yeah.
Or how has it aged over time? Has it gotten better?
Mhm.
And
Mm.
one of our most popular episodes was Ringo the Fourth. And I mean,
Yeah.
not only
Mhm.
popular episodes of that series, but of
Yeah.
our whole show.
Hmm.
I love Ringo the Fourth. I
Mhm.
actually, but for camp value, have to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Like, it's
sure.
hysterical. It's hysterical. It's not like high quality.
No, absolutely not. And and you get some passionate, I mean, we'll talk amongst ourselves, but then the comments you get from people, I mean, there are people who will passionately defend that album, and others will say, "Oh, it's just garbage, and why do you even talk about that?" I can't please everybody. But that's what's so fun about it, and
What is your subscribers for Talk More Talk versus the Toppermost? Because it seems like the Toppermost might have a UK element to it. Like, you may get more people for that,
yeah,
right?
I honestly don't know the numbers for Toppermost, because Ed is sort of in charge of that, but we're growing, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because we definitely want everybody to check it out, because we're
Uh,
still young, we're still growing at that, but I think I'm thrilled that you found it and came and like it. With Talk More Talk, we're up to, for subscribers on YouTube, we're about at 2,000, and we're growing. And then I haven't compiled all the different ones. I should with on the different, because we have the video version, and then we have an audio version, because a number of people have told me they like to listen to it, when they're working out or whatever, So so we have that too, and we're on pretty much every platform you can imagine. And Spotify and iTunes are probably the biggest. They have the most numbers, the highest numbers for us. So, and that's the thing with the podcast. I try to tell people, and you guys know this, it takes a while to build an audience. I mean, it's not like you're going to put your show out there and it could be the best show anyone's come up with. And if you don't promote it, and you don't build on it, it's, nobody's going to listen.
Happens. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I mean, we basically took a break. I mean, we did have people check out our show, and then all of a sudden there's 2-3 year gap. So it's like, where were they?
That's the other challenge. But that's the other challenge. Is, we try to get on as regular a schedule as we can, but like, with Talk More Talk, we've had a bunch of, all three of us we've been traveling. There was, my parents, and they're much better now, thank goodness, but both became ill earlier this month, so that delayed the recording. Life happens.
Life happens. Yeah, that's right. That's
right. So the goal is to get as, regular as possible, to try to put out, at least one a month or something like that. But, sometimes it's just not, the light, as I said, life gets in the way.
There's a couple of other things that came to mind about songs or artists that sound like the Beatles. And here's one from 1972. Please Go All the Way.
Mm-hmm.
You know that song?
Please Go All the Way. Which one is that? I can't. Which one?
Baby, go all the way.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant a solo song. I was like, whoa, I don't know that one. I'm in trouble. Yes, the Raspberries. Yes.
Yeah, the Raspberries.
I got you.
Yeah. Come on, come on, come on. I mean, they're actually saying, come on. I mean, good God.
Yeah.
And that's 72.
Mm-hmm.
But then in about 76, early 77, there was an album that came out on Capitol Records. And I don't know if many people know about this, but when the album came out, I was interviewed at the time because the speculation was that this was a new Beatles album. Now, let me give you some context. In 76, the Beatle fans were just craving so much and so hard for a new Beatles album, that when this album came out, there were no photographs on the album. Mm-hmm. There was just one name. And the speculation was, with some people, was that this was the Beatles, and they disguised their voices so much that some of the songs sounded like the Beatles, like Sub Rosa's Subway, and the other ones did not. And of course, I'm talking about Klaatu.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. And it's really funny because I think the musicianship of these guys, the musicianship on that album and the way that they sounded so much, not necessarily vocally, because that was my criticism back then, but musically was very advanced stuff. Mm-hmm. That kind of fit in, like maybe this would be sort of like the next thing that the Beatles would do in terms of their revolution, getting beyond the long and winding road and For You Blue and the whole Let It Be fiasco, excuse me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, that's just something else. And that was, again, 76, 77. So even back then, the influence of the Beatles with other artists was still there. And you know what?
Yeah.
It's still here today.
I was just going to say, you still hear it now, and it really has been fascinating. And who knows with Toppermost, maybe even after we finish tracing the Beatles on the charts. Who knows? Maybe we'll start getting into the 70s solo stuff and see, how and just in general, how much the Beatles continued influencing artists from, from the 70s, because obviously it wasn't far away from when when the Beatles broke up. So they were still very much, in the public consciousness. Yeah, it's just astounding to look at, from certain chord changes where you just, I mean, even, you listen, you're like, oh, that's Beatlesque. I mean, it just shows you how much influence they had, some lyrics and so forth. You just say, oh yeah, that's straight out of the Beatles,
And of course, the influence that the Beatles had on, of all bands, the Rolling Stones.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, at least back in the day, at the time, there was all this nonsense, that the media were pitting the Beatles versus the Stones, which was totally absurd.
Yeah.
And even the fan base was like, well, if you love the Beatles, then you hate the Rolling Stones. If you love the Rolling Stones, you hate the Beatles. And I was like, hogwash.
Yeah.
I was like, because I
agree.
love them both because they were so different. You can't compare them. There's no comparison. They're completely different bands. I mean, the Rolling Stones started off as a blues band. All they did were blues covers. The Beatles weren't doing blues in 1963 and 64. But as we know, the Beatles gave them their first top 20 hit.
Yep.
They just gave it to them. I want to be your man. And they really they made it dirty, basically, with Glenn Jones playing that really neat slide guitar on that song. But they were friends, they were chums, they were in the recording studios together. John and Paul singing on "We Love You."
Yeah,
they're actually singing on a Rolling Stone song, and of course Mick and Keith is singing along with the chorus on "All You Need Is Love." So, but there are influences musically. A song like Lady Jane, for instance, by the Rolling Stones, is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. Now, you wouldn't think that would be coming from the biggest rock and roll band in the world,
sure.
But it did. Dandelion is another one. She's a Rainbow with Nicky Hopkins playing that beautiful piano part. This was stuff that was cross-pollinating at the time. Absolutely. And it was going both ways because, of course, John and Bob Dylan, we know about that whole situation, which manifested with "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away," and probably "I'm a Loser" as well. That kind of thing. So it was not only with the Beatles influencing others, but the Beatles were being influenced by the other artists who they really, really admired and respected. So it's fascinating when you dig deep into this situation, and you can actually hear the cross-pollination that existed during the 60s when the Beatles were together.
Absolutely. There's a song I talk about in my book, songs we were singing, I Call Your Name.
Yeah.
And it's, I've always found it a really interesting song in many ways. But of course, when I was first learning about them, I thought, why in the bridge do they suddenly go into this other kind of rhythm? And then go back to, when, doing some digging, I found out that the Beatles were, as many people in England were listening to, basically an early form of ska called blue beat.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep. And they lend, those who may not be familiar with it, "My Boy Lollipop" by Millie Small. That's like the best known of this early ska genre. That was a huge hit. And so they were listening to it and obviously thought, hey, we really like this beat. Let's try and incorporate it into a song, into one of our songs. So they were, as you said, there was a lot of cross-pollinating going on. I mean, certainly the Beatles were setting trends. I mean, no doubt about it. But they were clearly listening to other kinds of music. I mean, Paul had his music hall, love of it because from his father. They were pulling in all these different influences, and it really is fascinating to hear that.
And of course, George Martin with his classical influence, because he was a member of the London Symphony Orchestra. He played oboe with the London Symphony Orchestra. And as you know who his oboe teacher was, kid? Do you know who his oboe teacher was?
No.
No? His oboe teacher was Jane Asher's mother.
No kidding. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Wow.
Yes. So George Martin's taking oboe lessons from Jane Asher's mother. And
Wow.
so because George is in the LSO, the London Symphony Orchestra, and George Martin was brilliant, of course, in his own right, because he knew that he was dealing with musical geniuses, and he knew that they were, again, always looking to do something different. So, hey, Paul, you might want to listen to this. This is a Johann Sebastian Bach. Give it a listen over the weekend. Yeah. And so what happens? He writes Penny Lane, and then he goes, "Hey, George, can we have like that trumpet? The high trumpet?" And bingo, then all of a sudden we have the synthesis of classical music meets pop.
Yep.
And it's an absolutely perfect example. And the same could be said going even earlier on Revolver with For No One. For No One has this beautiful French horn solo, which never would have happened without George Martin.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's the fifth Beatle.
Yeah. But again, we're talking about the influences where they were coming from, and John and Paul are listening to John Cage and Stockhausen,
yes,
Stockhausen and all this stuff, and all of a sudden we get into Tomorrow Never Knows and electronic music. Again, the synthesis of electronic music with quote unquote pop and rock and roll, which never happened before.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you imagine, thinking, okay, we're going to bring elements of noise music and fluxus and all into pop. I mean, no one else would have done that.
No. And when I first heard Tomorrow Never Knows, because I got the album as soon as it was released, and I put it on my little hi-fi. Didn't even have stereos back then. It was called a hi-fi for high fidelity.
Yeah.
And listening to this thing, and when I got to Tomorrow Never Knows, I didn't know what to think or what to do. I mean, it was beyond mind-blowing, and it was almost a little scary in a way.
Yeah.
Because what is he talking about? Again, the lyrics that John, and I know that they came from the book of the
Book of the Dead.
Yeah, the book of all things. Yeah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead or something like that. Yeah. So again, the radical moves that they made. And again, this was August 1966 when this was going on. It was earth-shattering. And then you think about the bands back then. I had a band back then.
Oh, cool.
I had a band since I was 14 because of the Beatles. As soon as I saw them on the Ed Sullivan Show, I got a guitar, like I think maybe 6 weeks later, and I formed a band maybe a month later.
Wow.
So I had a Beatles cover band in 1964 in Connecticut, and I kept that band going right through until 71.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with different formations here and there. But I remember one night after Penny Lane came out, and I was with my lead guitar player, Lenny Taplin from Scotland. And I said, "Hey, Len, why don't we work up Penny Lane and add it to the set as a joke?" And he said, oh, okay, yeah. Are you going to play the piccolo trumpet? And I said, yeah, well, that's the problem. So we were having conversations with other bands in Connecticut at the time. It was like, what can we do now? We can't play the Beatles hit songs anymore. We can't play Strawberry Fields. We can't play Penny Lane. What do we do? And then when Pepper came out,
it was over.
We were able, the good thing about Pepper was that you could do, of all the songs, of course, was with a little help from my friends.
That's true.
That was just pretty much guitar, bass and drums and maybe some keyboards here and there. But so all the bands did that. And then the real aggressive bands, when we messed around with Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Yeah.
But again, you didn't have the right instruments or the equipment to get the dun 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 lay, boom ba ba boom dee dee da. You could do it on the guitar, but it
Not the
just
same.
it just didn't sound the same. So after
Mm-mm.
Pepper, it was kind of like, okay, well, there's the Doors. We could do the Doors, you know. So we just went from basically from doing a lot of the Beatles, we went to the Doors
Mhm.
because it was easier to do the Doors.
Oh yeah, I could see that with their blues, the blues influence and so forth. And yeah, it
Oh,
was
it
more
was straight
straight
ahead.
rock and
It was
roll.
just straight ahead. There was no electronics.
Right.
There was no strings. Not in the early Doors. There was no strings. There was no brass. They got
Yeah.
into the strings and the brass later on,
Later.
which a
Hmm.
lot of people actually, a lot of the Doors fans hated. They thought that they were selling out when that happened.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So what's going on now with these guys? These guys are supposed to be, Mr. Rock, and they were kind of like, not like the Stones in a way, but compared to the Beatles. And I remember reading an article in Rolling Stone magazine when this had to be right when Light My Fire came out.
Hmm.
So this is the summer of 67,
Hmm.
which is the
Hmm.
summer of love,
Yep.
which Sergeant Pepper completely dominated.
Hmm.
And All You Need Is Love was the theme song for the whole
Yep.
summer.
Hmm.
That was the theme song.
Wow.
Hyde Asbury, the whole thing that was going on.
Hmm.
Monterey, the Monterey Pop Festival in June of 67 with Lou Adler produced that.
Yep.
But Jim Morrison made a statement in Rolling Stone magazine and he berated Pepper.
Hmm.
He basically said, that Pepper was pop junk. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
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 I
but it
got
was
you.
just like, what is this? He completely wrote it off as nonsense, which was really, I mean, for him, well, Morrison was in another world anyway. I mean, I believe the man was possessed.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that he would come out and say something when probably 99% of the populace in terms of the teens and the record buying world just thought that Pepper was the greatest thing since sliced cheese, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a game changer in many ways. And it's interesting today when you see lists like, Rolling Stone, you mentioned Rolling Stone, coming up with their, 100 greatest albums of all time and everything. And it used to be number one was Sergeant Pepper, and over the years, it seems like Abbey Road has started to kind of, dominate a bit more in that. But I mean, Sergeant Pepper is absolutely a masterpiece in so many ways. I mean, they were, I mean, a day in the life, for goodness sake. I mean, that's another one like Tomorrow Never Knows, where it doesn't
Yeah,
sound like anything else
sure.
today.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
they were, that was, and again, influence of the avant-garde. I mean, that's
Of the whole middle section, yeah, with
yeah.
what the orchestra had to do, and the members of the London Symphony Orchestra who were in the studio at the time, they're used to playing Beethoven or Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky, maybe Stravinsky, Debussy, things like that. And
Sure.
every note is written out. And George Martin goes, I want you to play from your lowest note to your highest note. And you're going, what? So that so that George Martin had to write out on music paper certain stops up along the way, which kind of gave them a guide,
Yeah.
so they knew where to go, and they had to do it as a glissandi, which means
Hmm.
they had to slide. You
Hmm.
couldn't go da 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 da. Da. No, it had to be da,
Yeah.
which is not easy to do. I mean,
No.
it's easy to do on the string instruments. You could
Hmm.
do that, but like to do that kind of thing, like on a clarinet, or an oboe, or a flute, it's difficult. But
Yep.
George Martin, as you probably know, he recorded that whole incredible middle section between John's bit and Paul's bit. He recorded it twice.
Yeah.
He did.
Amazing.
So you get even more of a delay effect and a chorus effect because
Mhm.
they didn't do it the second time the same way he did it the
Yeah,
first time.
sure. Of
And this is
course.
just absolute mind-blowing brilliance.
Yep.
And again, George Martin. I mean, it was Paul's idea or John's idea, I forget which one at this point, to
Mhm.
do that in between the two sections, but to be able to execute it the way that they did. And the recording equipment was a 4-track.
Yeah, I mean that's even more astounding. And and the way, as you said, that George Martin could translate what they wanted, and I mean, like, okay, going back to Tomorrow Never Knows, when John would say things like, "I want it to sound like 10,000 monks chanting on the mountain." Okay, sure, John, I
Oh,
totally got it.
sure. Not a
Yeah,
problem.
no problem. Being for the benefit of Mr. Kite, when John said to him, "I want to smell the sawdust," and he did it.
Yeah, absolutely
They're,
incredible.
they're Yoko Ono directions, to band members or something similar to that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really astounding how, and as you said, Brooke, with the the limited equipment they had at the time. I mean, today, younger people would say, "Oh, Pro Tools." I mean, well, obviously there was nothing like that back then, and so it
Absolutely
was
not.
all by hand. It was, cutting up the tape and I mean, just
Yeah,
amazing stuff.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just cutting up tapes, putting it into a paper bag, shaking it,
Yeah.
dumping it on the floor, and then
Mhm.
instructing the engineer, I think it was Jeff Emmerich at the time, just to put it together in every which way, any which way. And you
Mhm.
had that incredible thing going on being for the benefit of Mr. Kite.
Mhm.
So Tom, here we are. Let's bring good old Tom Dowker back in here.
Mhm.
Tom.
Yeah, Kit, the beauty of you living in Chicago is that you're going to be a presenter for Beatle Fest, right?
Mhm.
What
At this point, yes. Mhm.
I checked that out. Like it's not really in the city; it's kind of really close to the airport, and
Yes.
it's a really nice hotel. Do what is your presentation? Because it didn't ever. Last time I looked, they were filling in like what everyone was doing.
Yeah, they are still working on that. I can't say for sure what it's going to
What are
be.
you doing then?
And so, well, I mean, I'm not doing a presentation. What I've been doing the past few years is panels.
Okay.
Doing a lot of different panels. Unfortunately, this one won't be happening this year, but Ken Womack and I started an academic panel where we, talk about kind of what's going on in the world of Beatles research, and we bring the audience into it. And that's really been, it's really taken off. We'll be doing that in New York next year for sure, because Ken will be there. But there's a historians panel that I'm on where we take a different topic in every session we do. And again, it's sometimes like when Get Back came out,
Yeah.
we had a really great discussion about how does this change or not change Beatles history? What we
Mm,
thought
mm,
we knew and
mm.
what this brings in, but also, keeping in mind this is, it was an edited film. Are there other things we haven't seen that would perhaps change our mind? So we bring in topics like that. I'm not 100% sure what the topic will be this time. We're still, that's still being worked
Mm.
on. And that's really more and more people have been coming to that. I think it was in New Jersey last year. I mean, it was almost a full room. And
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun. And unfortunately, we will not be doing the podcast live there. We usually do that. We do,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, none of my co-hosts are going to be there this time in Chicago, so we can't do it. But normally we do that. But there are a lot of really fun activities to do there, and of course loads of music, great guests, and so yeah. In the past few years, as I said, I've been focusing on panels, some moderating, some media. I don't know if they're still going to do that, but there's a media panel where a bunch of us podcasters, videocasters, TikTokers. I mean, it's really grown now. Radio. I mean, there's so many different forms of media now, where we talk about kind of like what talk about a bit on this show is, you know, how do we come up with topics, and how do we, you know, interact with our audience? How do we, you know, create a show that is unique? You know, because there, as I'm sure you know, there are a lot of Beatles podcasts out there.
Yes,
There are.
that's right. You don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
By the way,
And
I'm noticing. Oh, I'm
one more
sorry.
thing
Go
before I
ahead.
head out. I mean, my last
Yeah.
question is your own Beatle fan magazine. Now,
Mhm.
when I was before media, I paid whatever it was for a yearly thing. I must have got like 3 or 4 years of it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I forgot it existed until I was listening to you, and I'm like, oh, she's writing for Beatle Fan, and it has a paywall. It's $10 for
Yes.
US for 4 issues or 6 issues.
Yes. Yep. It's still every other month. Yep.
So it's a lot of work. I mean, are you finding interviews, or are you like, do you have like a word count where they're like, oh, I need you to give me X amount of words?
There are a couple of things I do there. First of all, I've written a column since,
Oh,
believe it
okay.
or not, like 95, 96, somewhere around there. They were looking for an internet columnist in the mid 90s when the internet was this new thing, and you know, and more sites were appearing. And so Bill King, the editor publisher of Beatle Fan, sent, you know, had written in his letter from the editor piece, said, you know, we're looking for somebody to cover this for a column. And so I loved Beatle Fan, and it was like my dream.
Yeah.
I wanted to write for them. So I thought, this is my way in, you know. So I sent, you know, I sent a sample column and said, in fact, a few years ago, Bill told me he found the letter I had sent him, and saying, you know, I'm learning so much about the internet, and I think I could, you know, cover this. Really funny. But anyway, so I got the job, and I've been doing it ever since. So
Nice.
I've really had not only a front row seat to the, you know, seeing how the Beatles and solo have, you know, grown in the internet, but just in general, how technology has changed. I mean, you know, I was on dial-up when I was
Sure.
starting that column. I mean, it's very different now, obviously. So I do that, and then occasionally I will write feature pieces, and I maybe I haven't been able to do it quite as often, but I've done things. I remember I came up with some ideas of like writing about how the Beatles begin and end songs, because, you know, that's something that they craft as carefully as anything else. You know, whether they start abruptly to kind of grab you by the collar and yank you over and say, listen to this, you know, or the fade, you know, the fade in, things like that. You know, obviously, I feel fine, the you know, the feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even endings, you know, so some of them will end on unresolved chords to kind of, you know, sort of
Right.
leave you hanging. I mean, you know, that just wasn't done normally in
Right.
pop music.
That's right.
So I would write pieces on that. I wrote one recently about Motown and the Beatles, and the, you know, how they influenced each other.
Definitely.
And, you know, so I do things like that. I'll pitch ideas to Bill, and most of the time he'll say, yeah, go for it. You know, and so yeah, I'm very proud of being part of a Beatle Fan, and for so long, and it's still, you know, it's still going strong, still has great interviews and you know, articles. It's really you know, it's a special publication for sure.
Back in the day,
Mhm.
it was that was it. That's all you
Yeah,
had. That's it. So
you're
I
right.
think I have 3 to 4 years of it down
Mhm.
in the basement. I have to like look for it, but I didn't
Yep.
throw them away because that was your only connection to Beatles
Exactly.
fans.
Yeah, that,
So
and that's a good point. Fans, yeah, because,
yeah,
you know, and of course that's very different now, because, you know, back then it was either to connect with fans, it was that,
yeah,
or going to Beatle Fest every year and meeting people. And now, of course, that's changed with Facebook and so forth. But there's still, you know, I'm glad that that both the Fest and Beatle Fan are still going strong, though.
yeah,
It's yeah.
definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I may have to join up again. I'm excited.
Yes, do it. Do it. We're doing great stuff.
So I have to ask you a question, kid. I'm looking at your background and I do not see any John albums. I don't see any Paul albums. I don't see any Ringo albums. It's all George. Now, why
Oh,
is that?
part of it was just that I thought this background would work for this show, but also, I think we've covered George quite a bit on our show, and I'm glad we have, because some of the albums, I think, today you hear about, obviously, go this way, All Things Must Pass. I mean, that's
Yeah,
considered, his
sure.
masterpiece and so forth. But and that's one of the reasons we do Talk More Talk. There are so many other great albums that he did that do not get the attention that they deserve. I mean, I've been a big champion of 33 and a Third and George Harrison. I think those two albums were,
George
George
Harrison
Harrison's a
is wonderful.
masterpiece.
Yeah.
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 yep. That was like, in fact, we did an episode years ago called 1-2 Punch, where we each talked about, where there are albums that during the soul years where they, released, one of them released like two great albums in a row. And so yeah, we call it 1-2 Punch. And yeah, I picked 33 and a Third and George Harrison, because I mean, I just thought those were so, there were so many beautiful melodies. George was really shining even more as a lyricist. And I think those albums have grown in appreciation over the years, but you still don't hear about them as much
That's true.
as, say, All Things Must Pass, and maybe Cloud Nine. Cloud Nine might be the other one that you hear, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
great. I love the album, and so that's kind of what we're there for. We're there to, for our show, to say, hey, those are great albums, but check out these ones that you might have either passed over or maybe thought, oh, this wasn't one of his strongest periods, so I'm going to skip over. No, 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 don't do that. There are some wonderful. I mean, it's like the people who talk about Paul and say, well, they haven't listened to anything he's recorded since Band on the Run. I mean, come on. There were some. I mean, Flaming Pie is, you mentioned Flaming. That's an outstanding album. Chaos and Creation in the Backyard is also an incredible album. So, there are other.
Tug of War, Flowers in the Dirt. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. And so, if you stop listening after Band on the Run, which of
You
course
miss so much.
you miss a lot. So and so yeah, George is a case of, that I think some people sleep on some albums that really deserve another listen, as they say.
And I could also see that they got the Traveling Wilburys back there too, which is really fascinating how that whole thing came together. Of
Mhm.
course, we know that George and Bob Dylan had a very, very close relationship.
Oh
People
yeah.
always think of John and Bob Dylan.
Mhm.
There was certainly a relationship there. But in 1968, right?
Yep.
In late 68, George went to Woodstock and
Hmm.
hung out with Dylan at his home,
Hmm.
and that's how
Yeah.
close they were. So, and even on All Things Must Pass, there's, of course, George covered one of the songs that Bob wrote, If Not For You. That was
Yeah.
a Dylan song. But then there's another song that I believe they co-wrote together.
Hmm.
So that was fascinating. So you could see that the relationship was there when in the 80s, when all of a sudden there were Bob Dylan and now Roy Orbison
Hmm.
coming into that situation. I don't know, and I don't think, I'm trying to think, well, what was there any type of a relationship between George and Roy? And I don't know. And then of course now Tom Petty, which is another situation, and we know that Tom absolutely adored the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have been, for him to be in the Traveling Wilburys with Bob Dylan and George Harrison and Roy Orbison, it must have just blown his mind,
I
Tom
know.
Petty's mind. And of course, Jeff Lynne is no
Yeah.
surprise
Right.
because Jeff and George were very close, and Jeff was producing a lot of George's recordings at the time.
Mhm.
Of course, Jeff wouldn't have happened really without the Beatles, because if you listen to Electric Light Orchestra, now
Oh,
there's
yeah.
another example of talk about being influenced. Hello, Mr. Radio. And, it's like that's the Electric Light Orchestra. And so you could hear the Beatle influence. This is early on with ELO. So
Mhm.
then it only would make sense that George and Jeff Lynne would come together. But
Yep.
the Roy Orbison connection, how Roy how came into the situation?
Yeah, well, part of it was the Beatles and Roy did have a connection that the Beatles toured with him
He
for
did.
a
That's
time.
what I thought. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure. Yeah.
Yep, they toured with him, and then I know people are familiar with the story when when John and Paul wrote "Please Please Me," and John primarily, and it was originally written as like a Roy Orbison
Orbison
like
sounding song. Yeah.
sounding song. And
Right.
one thing, bringing in Toppermost, the Poppermost again, that we've come across a number of Roy Orbison songs on the charts at the time, and you really hear just first of all how popular he was,
Yeah.
in like the early to mid '60s, but he clearly had influenced a number of people, including the Beatles. I mean,
Right.
it really is so obvious. So fast forward, I'm trying to remember the whole story, if it was who precisely brought him in. I think it was Jeff Lynne, because I
Jeff
think he
Lynne.
was working
Was
with
he?
Roy.
Oh, was he?
Um, I think that was it. I think he was
Hmm.
working with Roy on what would become his final album,
Yeah,
Mystery
Oh.
Mystery
Girl.
Girl. Mhm.
And so, when George approached him with this idea about Traveling Wilburys and all, he said, "Well, I'm working with Roy Orbison. Why don't I bring him into this?"
Yeah.
And so that's how. And of course, it was a brilliant idea. It
Oh,
really was. He added a
absolutely.
lot.
But it's also fascinating that, I mean, we're talking about, you want to talk about super egos, and you
Hmm.
want to talk about musical giants.
Yeah.
And usually when you bring a number of super ego musical giants together,
Hmm.
sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yes.
And fortunately, they were able to, I think they left their egos at the door. And I think that they realized that this was such a unique situation to get together with people that they loved and respected
Yeah.
equally.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that helped them was they had limited time to do this, because, Bob Dylan was about to go on tour. George had just a limited amount of time in LA. I mean, there was this time crunch
Some
that was
restrictions,
going
yeah,
on. So
yeah.
that probably also helped them to focus and say, hey, we don't have time for egos here. And I think also it was just fun. I mean, you can
Yeah.
hear it in the music
Oh,
how
yeah.
much fun they
Oh,
were having.
oh, absolutely. It was a total blast, total
Hmm.
blast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when they did the second one, it was, I mean, without
Not
Roy,
quite as, yeah, it wasn't quite as good. I mean, there were
no,
some moments on there, but
yeah, but the material also, I think, didn't really stand up to the
yeah,
second
yeah,
one.
first one was the best for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Handle Me with Care is really such a wonderful song, no doubt.
Yeah. Oh, I love that song.
It's a
Absolutely.
great.
And End of the Line. Love End of the
Oh,
Line.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. The end of the line. Yeah, sure,
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
And then, the one that Roy does, sometimes it
Oh, yeah. What is it?
rock
Um,
me, shake me, or something or other. It's
yeah,
just,
I can't remember. Oh, I'm
yeah,
blanking out now, but yeah, I
yeah,
know what you're talking
oh
about.
wow, it's just got that, like, kind of like that railroad. It's just fabulous song. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, listen, this has been fabulous. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say, kid. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a really interesting discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. You're both great interviewers. That's wonderful questions. Kept me on my toes. But also, yeah, you can check out Toppermost the Poppermost. You can go to toppermostthepoppermost.net and find all the episodes there. You can check out Talk More Talk, which is on YouTube. Just search for that, or on virtually any podcasting platform you can think of. And of course, you can follow me, kiddotool.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Kiddo Tools Keynotes. It's called, is my page there. And you can follow, appearances I'm making, such as on this show and many others in person. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you both, Tom and Brooke. Really enjoyed it.
I just noticed that you have a Pet Sounds thing going on. This going
Yes.
Purple Rain rumors.
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, this is a thing I'm. Yep, I have. That's with Ken Womack. It's called Classic for a Reason, and it's we talk about albums that are considered, of course, all-time classics, and really deconstruct why. Why are they classics? Why do they still last? And our next one is indeed Pet Sounds. Really looking for really looking for that. And there are going to be some episodes where we may disagree on whether an album is a classic or not, and say the other, okay, convince me. Why is this a classic? So we've been having a lot of fun. We did rumors. That was our first episode. So again, follow me on my website and on Facebook, and you can find all the information there on how to register. It's really, we've been having a great time with this.
Great.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention again, because Pet Sounds came up. This is like October 1966, and Good Vibrations came out by the Beach Boys. And when those cellos came in, it was like that again. I mean, for the Beach Boys, which is strictly guitar, bass and drums, and sand, surfboards, and bikinis.
Yes.
I mean, that's the Beach Boys. That's and then to hear cellos coming in on a Beach Boys song, it was because Brian Wilson knew what was going on at Abbey Road. Beatles. Yeah. He knew what was going on. And Eleanor Rigby had come out with a double string quartet. So he's now bringing in, to talk about Beatle influences going that way to the Beach Boys. And of course, Paul loved the Beach Boys. You can hear it again on Revolver with Here, There, and Everywhere. Yes, very much so vocally. Yes. So again, the cross-pollination which was going on. Yeah. I want to offer you this, Kit. You're doing so many great things, and I don't know if it would be of any value or of any interest to you or not. But I'm making the rounds myself, and Tom as well. So if you at any point with what you're doing, if you'd like to include me and or Tom together to participate with you, based upon, we have obviously such a wonderful rapport going on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if there's something that we could add to any of your situations, whether it be a panel or a podcast or whatever it might be, just putting it out there and keep it in mind.
Absolutely. I may just take you guys up on that. All right, we just do that. Well, we will definitely keep in touch.
Very good.
We're Beatle hungry.
Yes.
Well, thanks again. Thank you very much, Kit, for joining us. Wish you all the best with everything that you're doing and all your endeavors. And of course, thank you, Tom Gauker, my co-host. And we'll be back again with more Come Together. But for now, we're going to say cheers, all the best, and peace and love to you all.